In the contemporary music scene, as an artist, there is no question that she has endorsed or at least permitted a worldly brand of sex and sensuality to be used to sell her music. While nowhere near as brazen as Madonna, aren't poses like this, or videos like Saving All My Love for You, a blatant celebration of adultery, just another more subtle side of the same coin. And even more importantly, isn't the so-called neutral stuff, by the very reason of its subtlety, potentially more destructive than the overt wickedness found in hardcore rock and roll? Surprised? Well, stop and consider the following fact of life. For something to be true, it has to be completely true. Inject into it even the smallest falsehood, and that truth immediately becomes a lie, a weapon in the hands of the one whom the scriptures call the father of all lies. And while there is no doubt that Satan's greatest triumph in this arena is to see people swallow lies devoid of even the slightest trace of virtue, cons like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, the fact is that his most effective deceptions are those that carry a degree of truth. And that's why the middle of the road, in music as well as in many other areas of life, can sometimes be the most dangerous place of all. By way of an analogy, take strychnine, one of the most powerful poisons in the world. In its raw state, it's unattractive and extraordinarily bitter. Left in a room with young children, it's unlikely that they would pay much attention to it, and even more unlikely that they could stand to eat enough for it to be fatal. So it is with some of the more extreme forms of rock, music that directly glorifies death and Satan. Most people avoid it, although it must be noted that our society has become so desensitized and perverted that some are only too happy to take Satan's bitter poison straight. To the point at hand, however, if you were to take the same poison and sugarcoat it and add pretty colors to it and make it look, for example, like M&Ms, and then leave it with the children, virtually every one of them will eat the poison without hesitation. If you were the devil, which method would you find the most reliable? The bitter poison or the sugar-coated candy? As the great philosopher and writer C.S. Lewis noted in his classic, The Screwtape Letters, indeed the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts. Using another analogy, the biblical picture of man without God is much like this poor fellow right here. He's in critical condition, suffering from a sinful, wicked heart that has separated him from God, spiritually dead and unable to do even the least thing to help himself. When his heart stops beating, he'll be launched into an eternity without hope. This person is in desperate need of help.
You got no reason to live. Tell me, how does it feel? Well, you're almost dead, and you're gonna go to hell.
Extreme forms of music, like heavy metal, glorify this fallen state. Perversion, despair, death, hell, Satan, and all the other horrors associated with sin are rubbed into the face of the listener. Incredibly, some subject themselves to this. Many others, however, opt for the safer stuff and head for the so-called neutral or pop music. But what does the pop musician really have to offer his listener? Cries of love, peace, and we are the world don't mean much to a dying man. In fact, by ignoring his condition or offering instead a false hope of salvation, this poor wretch's situation has only been made worse. Of course, there's nothing wrong with singing about love, unless it's the conditional and selfish love popularized by contemporary music. There's nothing wrong with singing about peace and caring for the world. These are all virtues taught and practiced by Jesus. There's nothing wrong with even singing about death and despair, as long as it is done within the framework of truth and God's redemptive purposes. Understand that God is reality. His Word is truth, and His Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, is salvation from sin. Heavy metal mocks this. Pop music ignores it. Which is ultimately worse? As we saw in Part 1, the primary reason for our existence is to know and experience God, an act called worship. Understanding only too well fallen man's tendency to lose sight of eternal things and reduce reality to a headlong quest for emotional and physical satisfaction, God cautions us throughout the Scriptures to seek first His kingdom and not let the world system wear us down. Above everything else, guard your heart. In other words, what you listen to, watch, and do. For it is the source of life. Make level paths for your feet, and take only ways that are firm. Do not swerve to the left or the right. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Hundreds of years later, Jesus amplified this teaching when He said that our eyes should be single, completely focused on God. If they're not, your whole body will be full of darkness. No one can serve two masters. You'll end up loving one and hating the other. The bottom line for us is that if we really love God, we'll find ourselves naturally offended by things that mock His character, ignore His love, or pervert His truth. If instead we gravitate to and embrace these types of things, we don't really love God. We simply can't. If anyone loves the fallen world's ways, the love of the Father is not in them. For everything that is in the world, the desires of sinful man, the lust of his eyes, and the boastings about what he has and does, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but the man who does the will of God lives forever. Now let's get back to the other key excuse that people use to avoid the truth, the issue of intention and motivation. Interestingly enough, Rock's fans aren't the only ones who live behind a wall of denial in this area. The artists themselves often like to play dumb. Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page denied any evil motivations behind his legendary involvement in the occult when he said, "I do not worship the devil, but magic does intrigue me." Stones guitarist Keith Richards told an interviewer, "There are black magicians who think we're acting as unknown agents of Lucifer." In other words, if something is going on outside our control, it's not our fault. All-American boy Michael Jackson, whose phenomenally popular video Thriller is filled with occult imagery, including his transformation into a werewolf and necromancy, or contact with the dead, begins the video with the following disclaimer. "Due to my strong personal convictions, I wish to stress that this film in no way endorses a belief in the occult." And both Ozzy Osbourne and Dee Snider of Twisted Sister try to downplay the obvious elements of rebellion and the occult in their music by claiming that it's all in fun, and then professing to actually be closet Christians. What do these denials mean? If all these people mean well, or are just trying to have a good time, they and their fans can't be considered followers of Satan, can they? Well, listen carefully, because everything we've seen and heard so far has been leading up to what I'm about to say. Part of the reason that many people have such a hard time with this Satan worship business is because they have a caricature of the devil and his religion in their minds. He's the horn-headed dude in the red pajamas, and following him, should he even exist, means sacrificing babies, drinking blood, or something else equally horrible or weird. In fact, nothing could be further from the truth. As we've already seen, Satan is an